I just want you to know what we've been doing, and then maybe we can have a longer and larger conversation. As a consequence of what I think we'd all agree is an incident that sort of shocked the conscience of the American people, unlike anything that I've seen or felt, and we've been around a long time, all the time I've been in public life. There have been a number of tragedies that have occurred and national catastrophes, but I've never quite seen anything that has shocked the consciousness of the American people, like 6- and 7-year-old kids being riddled with bullets in a classroom in a neighborhood in an area that was considered to be immune to this kind of behavior and had done everything that seemed logically able to be done to protect the children in that school. And so the president asked me, because I'd spent so much time on these issues relating particularly to guns and violence in my years in the Senate, whether or not we would, and admittedly it's quick, in a matter of less than a month, put together a set of proposals or a direction that we could move the federal government that would enhance the possibility that, or lessen the possibility this kind of thing could happen again. We know that it is, there is no silver bullet. There is no, as one of my friends said, no seatbelt that you can put on to assure that you will not be in this circumstance again. But I asked the cabinet to come together, the Attorney General, Homeland Security, Department of Education, Health and Human Services, et cetera, because we know this is a complex problem. We know there's no single answer, and quite frankly, we don't even know whether some of the things people think impact on this actually impact on it or not. And so I want you to know you have not been, quote, singled out for help, but we've asked a whole lot of people. I want to give you a sense of the meetings we've had so far. We met with the law enforcement community, which has obviously one perspective, and we met with, and there's a wide range of those communities, and they don't always agree, and anything from weapons to preventative action that can be taken with violence. We met with the medical community, a dozen or more, the American Academy of Family Physicians, the AMA, the American Academy of Neurology, et cetera, more than a dozen of leading institutions. We met with at-risk groups, at-risk youth and child advocacy communities, from the obvious ones everyone knows, from Boys and Girls Clubs, the YMCA, to the After School Alliance, and there's more than a dozen of those we met with. Domestic violence prevention community, which I've done a great deal of work on, having authored the Violence Against Women Act, and they have various views and suggestions. Legal and justice organizations, from the ABA to other legal and judicial organizations we've had in as well. Civil rights organizations, the participation in national service organizations, from the Kiwanis Club to the Rotary Club, and everything in between and beyond. Youth groups, campus groups, peace groups, et cetera. Gun safety advocates, from the Brady Group to all of the major gun safety organizations in the country. More than a dozen of them. The educators and parents who are groping for answers. The mental health community, including the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, to the NIH. We've been through all of those groups. Not an extensive study, but just a meeting of literature that the staff has been working in the government-wide, to much of which you already had, but some of which has been new, trying to devour. And maybe the most interesting meeting we had was with the interfaith group, representing, for the first time in all the time I've been doing this, not only the traditional mainstream Protestant churches and the Catholic Conference of Bishops, but the evangelical groups who are generally have been reluctant to engage in this because it's been viewed as maybe an attack on a cultural norms relating to rural communities and gun ownership and the like. But we've had all of these groups have shown up, including the leaders of the Muslim community, the Hindu community, et cetera. It was really a fascinating discussion, and fairly enlightening, quite frankly. There is a moral dimension to this, to state the obvious. And then we met with sportsmen and rural groups, which are distinct from, but not necessarily disagree with, the gun owner groups from the NRA and others, but they have a different perspective. They include the Association of Fish and Wildlife, Blue Water Strategies, the Outdoor Industry Association, et cetera. Yesterday, we met with the gun owners from ranging groups from the Defense of Small Arms Advisory Council, headed up by a retired Major General, to Firearms and Export Roundtable, which that's their business, to independent firearms owners, the NRA, et cetera. And there is actually difference among them as well. It's not a uniform view. We also met with retailers because they're a part of this potential solution in terms of background checks and the like, all the box stores, the big 5 sporting goods operations, and who sell an awful lot of weapons. And we met with your colleagues in Hollywood yesterday, the quote entertainment industry, but your entertainment as well, but the entertainment industry as it relates to film and broadcasting. And we will be meeting with technology experts because, to overstate the case, there's a lot could change if, for example, every gun purchased could only be fired by the person who purchased it, because it literally would be unable to be fired. That technology exists, but it's extremely expensive. But if that were available on every weapon sold, there's significant evidence that would may very well have curtailed what happened up in Connecticut, because had the young man not had access to his mother's arsenal, he may or may not have been able to get. And then we're meeting with outfits involved in social education and you and the video gaming industry. I come to this meeting with no judgment. You all know the judgments other people have made, and I think we had a very productive meeting yesterday with the broadcast and film industry, and they had some very constructive ideas as to how they could help. And so we're looking for help. I understand a few of you here are researchers in the assessing the impact, if any, on behavior of certain behaviors. So we're anxious to see if there's anything you can suggest to us that you think would help, as this president said, diminish the possibility, even if we only save one kid's life as a consequence of. We've also spoken, by the way, at length with, we have a problem beyond, quote, the massacres, the Columbines through the Auroras to Connecticut. There's 10,000 people a year gunned down in our cities. Different motives, different reasons, different explanations, but it's a real problem. It's serious. And one of the things that I know of no way to gather any real empirical data on, and you all may, is I make an analogy to when we first started dealing with the issue of crack cocaine. Moynihan and I, back in the early 80s, when it was coming from late 70s, early 80s, from the Bahamas, actually, when it first hit. And although I was senior, I was not equal to Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who was a great mind. And I'll never forget him standing up on the floor of the Senate and holding up what was called then photostatic copy of newspaper, front page of newspapers from, I think it was 1937 or 8, where one of the mafia bosses was gunned down in a barber chair and riddled with blood and is just about decapitated with a machine gun. And it made the front page of every paper in America. And then he held up, if I'm not mistaken, the New York Times, and he referenced a story, and it happened, if I'm not mistaken, it was in the Bronx, where an entire family, grandmother, mother, father, 3-4 children, aunt, uncle, were murdered execution style in their apartment. And it made page 57 of the New York Times. And he referred to it as defining deviancy down. And there's no measure that I'm aware of to be able to determine whether or not there's a coursing of our culture in a way that is not healthy. I don't know the answer to that question, and I'm not sure what impact it would have or wouldn't have on the kind of events we're looking at. But I wanted to tell you what we're about. The end result of this is I am going to be making a recommendation, not as a consequence of long, drawn-out hearings, which are useful, but because there's an awful lot of research and material that's been lying around over the last 10 years in the various agencies, from recommendations on having a federal a federal weapons trafficking statute to universal background checks to making more widely available mental health assistance. And so I'm going to be submitting to the president a proposal as to how to proceed. I'm shooting for Tuesday. I hope I get it done by then. We get it done by then, cabinet members. And so I just wanted to fill you guys in on what it is we're about. And with that, I'd like to disinvite my friends in the press. I thought we had a very straightforward, productive meeting.
What did you think of what they said about the meeting with the president?
I don't have any comment on what anybody said about the meetings.
Thank you.
Thank you.